Did you know that with a narcissist, there's almost always covert incest with a parent? So, most conversations about narcissism are about a form of neglect or abuse from the parent, and that is always there too. However, if you peel back the layers, there's always enmeshment between the child and the parent, often the other gendered parent. So, if the narcissist is a man, it's his issues with his mommy. But that can also look like such enmeshment that they play with the boundaries where it is incestuous. You see, the child's self is always suffocated or distorted to serve the parent's need. So, under analysis of the relationship between that narcissist and their parent, you're going to find this dynamic of either too much attention in some ways, where you're looking at emotional enmeshment or covert incest, and then you're going to find too little in other ways. So, you're looking at emotional abandonment. And that dance is what you can see when a narcissist is doing love bombing and then starts the process of abuse. Because the child learned, I'm not allowed to exist as myself, I only exist to regulate my parent. Covert incest is when the parent treats a child like the emotional spouse. They dump their needs on them. They are always seeking their validation. They have secrets. In all of these ways that are enmeshed, then blur the lines for everything else. That child never has space to be a child and to explore who they are and develop who they are. They must be a mirror to the parents' needs. And well, when you have an emotionally stunted adult, they are going to seek validation from their children that is absolutely inappropriate. And often covering up the inappropriateness with, I'm just the cool mom. You see, I have a seat in my office where I can see and hear the reality of what happened. So it isn't always just this covert incest and inappropriateness of emotional enmeshment. It always plays these physical boundaries too, where they're seeking validation. That is like, do I look hot? Does this make me look sexy? They will be sitting in the lap of their teenage boys. They'll be smacking their ass. They'll be talking all about how their other boys, they can tell how their friends all want them. There's always playing with these edges of sexuality in order to seek validation. But what that does in a developing mind of a child is destruction. A narcissist was trained to be a bottomless well for a parent's need, even before they could ever remember. So they in turn become a bottomless pit, chasing supply, always trying to prove that they're good enough for a parent they never stood a chance at satisfying. And yes, it's tragic. But the hard truth is, the reality with being in a relationship with a narcissist is managing the abuse, but never escaping it. And while this all might feel familiar to you because you're replaying your childhood where you were taught by emotionally immature parents that love should be earned and not freely given. Now, I've done content about breaking the trauma bond, and I'd be happy to do more if it's helpful. But to go back to the subject at hand, covert incest with narcissism leaves a mark. Don't gaslight yourself into believing what you see isn't there. If there's something off about the family dynamics, trust what your body is telling you, even if your brain has a hard time making it make sense. Remember that the people that function this way don't see a problem with how they are, so they're just going to view your attempt to hold them accountable as you're the problem. So be a problem anyway. Get out of the relationship with a narcissist because it is a never-ending pit hole to where it will lead you to have an autoimmune disease or cancers or many different variations, where eventually the cortisol poisoning will deteriorate you from the inside out. However, if you have children with a narcissist and need to co-parent, just be the stable one that right sizes everything for them. And by right sizing, I mean giving them context into what's happening. If the narcissist family are then, having these blurred boundaries of them, consistently complimenting them on their looks or start putting them down, make sure you set boundaries in order to protect the children as best as you can. But always when they're in your presence, you get to tell them how that's inappropriate. You don't need to tell them the variations, and you shouldn't tell them deepening of something that is beyond their understanding. But something as simple as, well, that's inappropriate of grandma to say. Well, that's inappropriate of dad to say. Well, they know better than to say that. That isn't right to say to a child. That gives them context to then realize, oh, they're safe to be a child with you. And that's all a child needs. Even with a parent that is a narcissist, if they have one parent that is grounded, stable in their own emotional development in order to allow the child then to develop, they'll be just great. I know that doesn't mean that they're not going to have a hard time with that one parent. Being a child of a narcissist is difficult. But if that child has a one securely attached parent to them, they're able to regulate that narcissist with their own autonomy, their own authority, and they will process through any grief by accepting the reality and have resilience in adulthood that that parent that got in that relationship with a narcissist could have only dreamed of. Now, whether they were actually assaulted by a parent as a minor, or had incestuous relationships with them as an adult, or had incestuous relationships with siblings or cousins or other relatives around them, you'll never know the reality of that truth because it's often so compartmentalized that it's hard to even access in therapy. But that's not your bag to fix anyway. Just know that the erosion of self that creates a narcissist sometimes can be darker and more deviant than we all want to admit.